Today we're joined by Gavin Lynch, who's a Canadian landscape painter based in Wakefield, Quebec, and he's joining us here today to talk about his current exhibition, Light Spells, which will be on display at our 1384 Dufferin Street location from November 6th until December 1st. So thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I wonder if you could kick us off by telling us a bit about this exciting body of work.
Yeah, so Light Spells, this exhibition was really centered around the idea of painting the intangible things. Fleeting moments of light, filtering through trees, sunsets, atmospheric effects, fog, those little kind of transient moments we experience in nature that are there and gone.
Yeah. And sort of thinking about like, how did it come about? You know, because we've been representing your work for a little while and been following your work for a while, and it sort of marked I guess a bit of a departure from what you've been working on previously.
Yeah, I'd say it's been in the works all year. It kind of started with a previous exhibition that I had in Edmonton this September. Whereas the previous work was really kind of focused on this virtual digital world that was perhaps inside a computer or inside a screen projected onto these canvases. These works really were about reconnecting with the landscape, reconnecting with the landscape that was around my house where I live in Western Quebec, north of Ottawa. And I guess in a time of like AI and our attachments to our devices being what they are, I really wanted to come back to nature. It felt important to kind of get back to what is actually out there as opposed to like inside a screen.
Yeah. There's a lovely softness to the work, and I guess that was really sort of apparent in your mind when you're trying to capture the landscape. Was that sort of, like you're saying, dappled light, those atmospheric effects, the fog, really creating that sense of experience, like as if somebody is sort of situating themselves in the space.
Yeah, totally. And in a sense, like depicting the intangible moments, like in doing so, like as the title of the exhibition kind of states, it's like then the same as when you're experiencing these things in real life, it kind of casts like a small spell on you where you're like, I'm gonna stop and take pause to like take it in.
Yeah, like you really get a sense of that when you look at each of the pieces. And so you said it's sort of inspired by the environments that you have where you live. Are they sort of direct translations, or like how do the compositions come about?
The working methodology in my practice is still the same. So a lot of them are actually real places, and some of them are maybe kind of fabrications of real places or real moments I've experienced. So I start a lot of the works with the preparatory works or digital collages that might involve photos of my own or a photo referencing a place that I found online or a combination of the two. And then perhaps with some like digital drawing thrown in there.
Right.
Yeah, so they kind of get constructed on my computer as like a reference for the actual painting.
Yeah.
But some of them are very direct and some of them are less so. They need to be more constructed to kind of capture the moment I'm looking for.
Yeah, and so when you do those digital collages, how is that sort of translated from the digital to the physical?
Well, in painting, like the one constant is that you have the constraints of the four edges of a canvas, obviously. So I'm working a lot of that stuff out on the computer, as opposed to, sitting there with a pencil or like trying to figure out the exact angle of a tree. I like to have a lot of that compositional stuff sorted out before I start working. So it's more about like the act of painting and being in the moment instead of kind of sitting there and parsing out what's going to happen.
Right.
I used to figure everything out on the canvas on the fly as I went, and slowly my practice sort of evolved to incorporate as many tools that are useful to me as possible.
No, I mean, if your work is somewhat addressing the ways in which we interact with the landscape in a digital environment, then it makes sense to use that digital environment to your benefit in your practice.
Yeah, totally. And as opposed to the work of last year, this work is slightly less digital in nature. Like it doesn't feel like it's not depicting the virtual world, but I feel like the influences of like screen culture and digital tools are kind of at the margins of this work. Like it's kind of peeking through in subtle ways.
Yeah, especially when you look in, say, the reflections. That's the little element the little pixelation sort of creep in subtle ways, or the collage aspect of the work, sort of with the ways in which the leaves are sort of sitting on the trees, or the branches. It's very subtle, which I think is a great motif that you see throughout the work, but again, like you're saying, really sort of referencing that like lived experience and connecting with nature.
Totally, yeah. It feels like, as a painter anyways, that this shows a return to being outside as opposed to kind of inside
Yeah.
the screen.
And you mentioned, and we've mentioned the word painting a number of times, and we were chatting yesterday about the process, and one of the tools that you've kind of honed over the past year and a bit has, I guess, increased in focus in terms of what you're using, and that tool is airbrush.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of airbrush in this, and you know, in painting, there are so many ways to kind of arrive at the same place, and for these really subtle, kind of smooth gradients, I find that the airbrush is really the best tool for these seamless transitions and like chromatic gradients in really small areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something that, yeah, I began to explore over the last couple of years, and I feel like it's kind of reached some sort of...
Like the zenith.
Well, not a zenith per se, there's always room to do more, but a certain kind of like resolution, you know, like it feels resolved, what I wanted to do with it.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so I think with every body of work or every year or two as a painter, you kind of like consciously or even unconsciously look for problems to solve through your painting practice.
Yeah.
And that was one of them for me, was like, how can I incorporate, because I've always incorporated a lot of tools in my work.
Oh, yeah.
But how to combine these disparate approaches to painting and make them into cohesive pictures that are like, have kind of an internal logic that has its own reality, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense, yeah. And I guess two sort of follow-ups to that is, what was one of the biggest challenges of working with an airbrush? Because I've never really worked with one. I've just kind of like toyed around with it. But like, in terms of like approaching fine art painting, what was one of the biggest challenges for you?
Well, I think there's a lot of baggage, kind of like cultural baggage with the airbrush as being something that, you know, maybe at a carnival would be used to paint like a unicorn on a t-shirt, or
it's like a hobbyist tool.
For sci-fi art. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call those people a hobbyist by any means. I still think that some of that art is really amazing.
Yeah.
But taking it out of that context and using it in a way where maybe it doesn't read as airbrush per se.
Yeah.
I also feel like there's a lot, in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of like airbrush art in the art world.
Yeah.
Like some really great painters who use it to varying degrees. So I guess like finding a way to kind of make it my own and incorporate it into pictures that are like recognizably still mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
No,
challenge.
I think that's quite adept, and I think it's much like a squeegee. You know, think of squeegee as being like a fairly utilitarian sort of instrument. That's, I don't know, not that it's crude, but it maybe doesn't have the finesse that you would think it would. But when you look at the way artists do, and I know that you use it a bit, Catherine McNaughton, you know, the exhibition before this, she made ample use of the squeegee, the ways in which you can use those sorts of tools and I don't want to say elevate them, but, you know, kind of make them your own and put power into them and sort of demonstrate that you can really make anything with anything.
Yeah, making them useful or relevant. And for me, it's really about like the combination of different effects or like approaches. So the show has a lot of airbrush for sure, but also has a lot of the thicker applications that are like squeegee or palette knife. Yeah, so it's like, how do those two things relate, and how can you kind of manipulate that relationship and change it like throughout the course of a show?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, and let's take a sort of step back and maybe talk a bit about your background and sort of how you became an artist and sort of find yourself here today.
Yeah, I started, well, I guess when I was 19, I was taking art history in Victoria. And kind of, you know, like a lot of 19-year-olds, was maybe a bit aimless. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I was taking a bit of everything. And art history was the one thing that kind of stuck. But after maybe 1 or 2 semesters, I thought making art would be a lot more fun than writing about art. So I dropped out and spent a great deal of my 20s just painting on my own. And I don't know, I think it's probably a common thing with like a lot of new artists is that I wasn't sure if going to art school was like a valid thing to do if I didn't actually know what I was doing. So I had in my head like I had to learn how to paint before I could like have the privilege of going to art school. So I think I painted from about the time I was 20 or 21 until I was like 26 or 27, and then I went to university in Vancouver. Did my undergrad there, and then took a year off, and then did my graduate studies at U of O.
Wow. And so you painted, you know, on your own for about 5 years before making the decision to go study. Was there a specific moment, like, I don't want to say like an aha moment, but was there a specific moment where you realized, okay, yeah, I'm ready to do this?
Probably not. I think it was probably an age thing. It's like, if I don't do this now, then when am I going to do it?
Right.
I'm glad I waited, though, to be honest, because I think if I had gone when I was like 18 or 19, I probably would have been a lot more impressionable, because like landscape painting, even though there's like a rich history of it in BC, like people like Emily Carr and, you know, some of the group of 7 ended up there. It wasn't en vogue or cool to be making landscape paintings by any means.
No, it was still falling into certain tropes that I think specifically Canadians think about when they think about Canadian landscape. It's those kind of like iconic, I don't want to say timeless, but you know, there's an element of it to it that they think of immediately recognizable, and to sort of think about how, I guess, since the like mid 2000s sort of onwards, how we've seen this kind of like revival and renaissance of Canadian landscape painters who are such as yourself, like looking at the landscape in a very sort of, I hate the word to say modern or contemporary, but in that sort of way, and putting their own unique twist on it. I think that's really been an exciting thing to see over the past 20 years.
Yeah, I didn't really realize that there was a scene around it until I ironically like went to Ottawa to do my grad studies and then started paying attention to what was happening in Toronto. But I think the beginnings of that were really like in the Toronto scene. 'Cause Vancouver has more of a history of like photo conceptualism and like conceptual practices, and I mean, there's some great painters who live there, obviously, but I really felt like, oh, okay, it's okay to paint landscapes when I first started showing in Toronto with Angel Gallery,
Yeah.
which would have been in 2014, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, oh, I have permission. It's okay to be doing this.
My contemporaries are doing it, so okay,
Yeah, it's all right.
I'm in good company then. Yeah, it is interesting that, you think of in Toronto. I mean, also Toronto's a very large art market.
Yeah.
But, we're quite removed from nature when you think about it.
Which is maybe why it works.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah, people sort of see it and they're like, oh wow, it's amazing. But then you try to do the same thing in BC and you're like, I see it every day.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more on the nose in BC.
Yeah.
Because people are spending a lot of time in the woods and the mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And early on in your career, what was one of the biggest lessons you learned, I suppose, as, coming out of grad school and painting and beginning to do it professionally?
Well, that it's really about like daily practice and just continuing to do it all the time. I really believe in that, still, that you need to be in the studio consistently. But also, I think making art, like, as a career, it's not really for the faint of heart. That you need to have a thick skin and kind of be adept at dealing with a lot of rejection and disappointment along the way. I think that was the one thing early on, before I started showing in Toronto, was that you just need to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you need to
persevere.
Yeah, I mean, I played sports until I played hockey competitively.
Oh, that's right.
I moved away from home when I was 15, and I played until I was 18. And I think, if nothing else, it taught me how to. And I was a goaltender, so it was like kind of sink or swim scenarios every night in front of a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I became really familiar with this idea of failure and that it was okay to fail. And often I think like in the studio by yourself, it's like the failures are where you learn the most. And
yeah.
So it's worth risking a lot in your practice when you're making work, because those are the moments where you're going to glean the most. But yeah, how you deal with failure or and just the idea of like working a lot. Those are the two things I think they're the most important, like early on. Anyways. Yeah.
I knew you played hockey. I don't think I knew you were a goalie. I was a goalie as well.
Oh, okay.
And it's interesting when thinking back on it. It's like you're playing a team sport, but you're really like the individual who is the linchpin. You're almost playing a game by yourself.
Oh, totally.
And I think it's one of those mentalities that you really adopt early on, that you're watching everything that's constantly happening, but you're also really mindful of like how you're moving within your own space.
Yeah. I mean, I think it speaks volumes that yourself included. I know a lot of people in the arts who played hockey who were goalies.
That's interesting. That's a weird commonality, but
it makes sense though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the temperament or kind of personality for a goalie. It makes sense. It just works.
Yeah. It definitely does. And I guess like, what was one of the biggest successes that you had, maybe early on in your career, or sort of in the first part of it? Like, what was the thing that sort of brought you the most satisfaction?
I think, to be honest, just showing where I was showing early in my career with Jamie Angel here in Toronto, because I really respected his roster. I felt like it was really important to be showing with people whose work I really admired and who I felt like my work kind of wasn't, not that my work was like theirs, but that it could relate to their practices could relate, and I had a lot of respect for those people.
Yeah.
I think that was, yeah, that was a big thing. And it was really he was my first art dealer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were also an RBC finalist as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a pretty great accolade as well.
Yeah. 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 It was fun.
And what was one of the impetuses for throwing your hat into the ring, so to speak?
Oh, I think it was just something that all painters were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't the first time I had tried. But yeah, I think for painters who were coming out of graduate programs, it was the kind of quickest way. It was, it was great for exposure, but it was also, in some ways, it felt like a tastemakers competition. That if you were in the RBC, then it was like a check mark or a feather in your cap or some sort of validation. And yeah, it was good because you also meet a lot of your peers who, through various points of your career, you'll be in touch with and sort of maintain relationships with. In much the same way as like the people you study with. So
yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, some of the people who I study with are practicing or teaching, and maintaining those connections, I think, is one of the unique benefits of going to art school, is that you do get to meet some like-minded individuals and
community.
Yeah, and creating and hopefully continuing to foster that community.
Yeah, which is important when you're doing work that's so isolating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much like being a goaltender.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And I guess I know we're looking at this show, and you've just sort of completed it, but is there kind of like, what do you see on the horizon in terms of like where because you said you see each body of work as an opportunity to expand like your techniques or your approach or your thought process. Like, where do you see this taking you?
To be honest, it's been kind of in the back of my mind already that I want to expand my repertoire of like mark making and tools I'm using. So there'll probably be a period of experimentation again when I go back to the studio. And like playing around. I think play is really important, and some failures, probably stuff that I won't show you for a while. But I think I'm going to keep it like vaguely in this kind of realm of like image, like the types of images I'm making.
Yeah.
Whereas like previously, sometimes when I experiment, like it's entirely thematic or research based, like the virtual kind of digital works. Really went into this other kind of realm. They took viewers almost into like the guts of a computer.
Oh wow.
Like the scenes were like highly polished, like they looked like they were made by machines.
Yeah.
And were virtual. So I think like the motifs here will stay the same. Like I want to stay outside in nature, but I'm going to explore different kinds of mark making and tools and materials again.
Yeah.
And see where it leads me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a word there, play. And I think play is really important. And whenever you hear an artist mention that, I think it is a great thing to hear, because it should be fun, and you should remind yourself of why you're doing it on a daily basis.
Yeah. I think like art making, when it's going well, it's like really serious play.
Yeah.
It's serious play that if you're paying attention, you can kind of the goal for me is to keep pushing things forward and have it evolving without forcing it, per se.
Yeah, and taking the time. Like it takes, you can have deadlines and you can have goals, but I think affording yourself the time to explore and really realize that concept and have it manifest is an important aspect to creating anything.
Totally, yeah. It's like a slow burn. process.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a slow burn.
Yeah.
So before we close, I ask a couple thought-provoking questions. What's the best piece of criticism you ever received?
Best piece of criticism. Well, I had a professor at Emily Carr who was obsessed with composition.
Okay.
And I guess this would be like a series of criticisms over many years.
Okay.
Things like, have you thought about like the angle of this tree and how it relates to the overall axis of your painting? Maybe you should redo it and move it like 3%, 3 degrees to the counterclockwise, stuff like this. And he was obsessed with composition, like classical composition, like composition in Byzantine mosaics, things like this. So I guess I hear his voice in the studio a lot. I don't know if it's like criticism, but yeah, there are people who, like from your past and your education or whomever, who kind of like sit on your shoulders in the studio, like little miniature kind of ghosty versions of them.
Yeah.
So I hear him a lot of the time, especially when I'm making like the preparatory images, and like it's probably part of the reason why I like composing things on the computer too, is because you can really manipulate things until you feel like it's just right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a great, some people would, sketch or do preparatory paintings, but I think, being able to work on the computer and very quickly realize composition, is a really great asset.
Yeah, it's just a different way of making art. And I think that some of those works, like on their own, are really resolved.
Yeah. If you could have a conversation with any artist, living or dead, who would it be and what would it be about?
Maybe David Hockney.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
She's also super into composition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. I like
and
that.
And just painting in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a good overarching conversation.
Yeah, maybe him or like Ed Ruscha.
Oh, yeah.
The American painter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Or maybe both of them at the same time.
Have a panel?
Yeah.
Like a round table?
Yeah.
And what role do you see as art playing in society today?
Oh, boy. Well, really, all the roles. I mean, it depends what kind of art we're talking about. There's, there's so many different types of artists working out there who are, either have like a conceptual artist, or you could have someone like me who's a landscape painter. And my stuff is kind of like, I think at the best of times, it's like a contemplative portal for people to consider our relationship with nature and maybe like what's at stake with climate change and things. And then you'd have someone like Kyle, who also shows here, whose work is like really focused on like protest and like stewardship for nature. So even just within like landscape practices, those two things are like, we're coming at things in a very different way.
Yeah.
I mean, just in the broadest sense, like art's job is to communicate, and often how it does that is like as a mirror of what's going on in the contemporary world. So I suppose that, and like what are like the millions of ways that it can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's great. I like that. I think that's a good place to end on.
Cool.
So thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And again, is here with Gavin Lynch, who joined us for his current exhibition, Light Spells, which again will be on display at our 1384 Dufferin Street location from November 6th until December 1st.